The voice of one, the James Webb Telescope, again, is killing atheistic materialism. This is going to be part 3, and I'm going to start again. I've got 2 articles this time. One's from the Journal of Nature, and then it's a news article based on the Journal of Nature article, and they're quoting scientists basically from the article. So here's the title: The James Webb Telescope spots the most distant smoke molecules ever seen in space. And that's on June 5th, 2023, Journal of Nature. Well, what did they find? Tangles of huge organic molecules are drifting through a faraway galaxy, astronomers using the James Webb Telescope have discovered. So the galaxy is 12.3 billion light years away, and it's so distant that it appears as it did less than 1.5 billion years after the Big Bang. So this Justin Spilker, it must have been basically formed on overdrive. Well, I don't know why, but okay. Everywhere we see the molecules, and this is an interesting statement, we'll talk about it more in a minute, but everywhere we see the molecules, there are stars forming. But there are also parts in that ring where there are stars forming where we don't see the molecule, he says. That's the part we don't really understand yet. Okay, we'll talk about it in a minute. Now, pause suggests that the galaxy was busy making stars early in the universe's history. Well, again, that's an interesting conundrum there. We'll talk about that more. And once again, it is reiterated here that just after 10% of the current age, it already had a mass similar to that of the Milky Way. Well, if you watch the previous 2 videos in this series, we've already discussed that. In fact, in the second one with Michio Kaku, he talked about how there are galaxies out there 10 times the size of the Milky Way. Not just the size of the Milky Way, 10 times the size. Okay, and in the first video, they talked more about again, I did anyway, that there were LMB particles, the carbon-based life form particles that were needed, molecules, were available in the very early Earth. Well, I've got a little definition here. Well, I looked up soot. Well, what is soot made of? Well, it's produced by, hydrocarbon fuels. Oh, really? Polynuclear aromatic hydrocarbon is what the PAH stands for. And again, soot is made from hydrocarbon fuels. Well, how did they get it? Well, fossil fuels. Well, derived from coal, oil, and natural gas. And where did they say the coal, oil, and natural gas came from? Well, supposedly they came from what? Organic matter here on the Earth, like dead dinosaurs and maybe some plants, like biofuels derived from plant or animal matter. It's the same thing. Fossil fuel and biofuel are the same thing. Synthetic fuel, of course, is synthetic, so we're not talking about that. And electrofuel, that's also synthetic. That's manufactured. And then peat, again, that's just talking about vegetation. So why they break it down in so many different ones is kind of interesting, but basically from a cosmic evolutionary point of view, it had to be some kind of biofuel. But seeing pause in this distant galaxy is an important clue to how these molecules form. Now, wait a minute. Seeing the pause in this distant galaxy is an important clue to how these molecules form. That's not true. They are quite mysterious. Yes, they are mysterious. In fact, they're not supposed to be here. That's not an important clue how these molecules form. It's an unmitigated, absolute surprise, actually. Albert adds that this new discovery will force astronomers to rethink how dust first formed and how that shaped the early generations of stars and galaxies. Of course, like I said in one of the previous ones, I gave in the second one, I went over a short history of what they used to say. And they talked about how there had to be 3 or 4 star generations before we got to carbon-based life molecules. And 3 or 4, again, star generations and supernova. Now, in this news article, this is the news article, James Webb Space Telescope discovers oldest organic molecules in the known universe, 12 billion light years from Earth. Okay. Scientists using the James Webb Telescope have spotted a cloud of complicated organic molecules in a galaxy 12.3 billion light years away, the farthest from the Earth that molecules of this kind have ever been detected. The discovery, which was published on June 5th in the journal, might might help astronomers piece together a clearer picture of how galaxies develop. That's an interesting statement. In other words, they give you the idea, or they're starting to, that, well, anyway, we didn't expect this. Detecting these complex organic molecules at such a vast distance is game-changing. Right, it upends everything. The team studied this light, and their initial analysis indicated that SPT was rich in heavy elements, but the scientists couldn't get a good look at its organic carbon-containing components using the South Pole Telescope. But when they used the JWST, sure enough, when the team trained the space-based telescope on the galaxy last August, a mess of complex organic molecules stood out. Everywhere we see the molecules, there are stars forming. Okay, now again, this is a reiteration, and I want to talk about this a little more in a minute, but everywhere we see the molecules, there are stars forming. An astronomer at Texas A&M University. This supports the hypothesis, now that's interesting, that organic molecules help to birth stars. Well, that's interesting. That goes against everything they talked about in my second video. It gives you the actual cosmological history that they believed before we put up the James Webb Space Telescope. Interesting, but weirdly, there were also patches of the galaxy that lacked Pah clouds, and the team observed stars forming in those spots as well. So I have to ask, then the significance just flew out the window. But anyway, we'll talk about it again. That's the part we don't understand yet. Well, understanding why and how stars form in these regions and how they interact with organic molecules will require further study, of course. This work is just the first step. We are very excited to see how this plays out. I'll bet you they're not excited. I'll bet you they're not excited at all. They're befuddled. Anyway, so both the article and the news stories, they're filled with contradictions. And again, from the article, this supports the hypothesis that organic molecules help to burst stars. Well, that's a startling admission. Again, in the previous two videos I produced, the organic molecules weren't supposed to come along for billions of years. Organic molecules, in other words, they've got it backwards now. Now, the history is backwards. Organic molecules help birth stars, not, like Neil Degrass Tyson said, the stars helped birth the organic molecules. Oh my good. But this new find logically suggests what? Well, first of all, it could suggest that the universe could be much younger than 13.6 billion years. And I'll talk more about that in a little later. But it's no longer a logical necessity for the universe to be even 13.6 billion years old if organic molecules existed so early in our universe. So in the previous video, the organic molecules existed 180 million years after the Big Bang. And some of those galaxies, like Michio Kaku said, were 10 times that of the Milky Way galaxy. So I repeat, Mr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, we are not stardust. Instead, heavy elements existed from the beginning. And in fact, look what they're doing. They're flipping the science. They're flipping the science. They're saying the organic molecules came before the stars, not on account of the stars. Wow. So, other concerning statements. Quote, tangles of huge organic molecules are drifting through a faraway galaxy. It must have basically formed on overdrive. Well, that's the biggest understatement of this video. It really is. How could it be formed on overdrive back then, but not today? And then you have two contradictory statements, and they like to do this. Well, everywhere we see the molecules, there are stars forming. Okay. But there are also parts in that ring where there are stars forming where we don't see the molecules, he says. Okay. So what's the significance? There is none. In regards to that, there is no significance. So we didn't expect this. Detecting these complex organic molecules at such a vast distance is game-changing. It is game-changing. It upends everything they taught about it in school. And remember that from now on. And now the setup is coming. Well, for what? Well, we're going to redefine the science and then claim later on we expected this. And I'm going to show you a case in point. And I'm going to use something that I've always found intriguing, was dinosaur biologicals. So here is an article, and Mary Schweitzer was the one who's credited with the discovery in a T-Rex, Tyrannosaurus rex bone. She found biologicals, and supposedly the bone is 68 million year old soft tissue. And then the article supposedly says, well, they finally have a physical explanation of how biologicals could last in 68 million year old soft tissue. Well, what did they do? Well, they did a 2-year bench study. Whoop-de-doo. A 2-year in the building bench study supposedly proves that biological material could last 68 million years. And I'm telling you, not on your life. Iron in the blood is a free radical and will destroy them. Anyway, what we found was unusual because it was still soft and still transparent and still flexible, Schweitzer told Live Science. Scientists had thought proteins that make up soft tissue should degrade in less than 1 million years in the best of conditions. In most cases, microbes feast on a dead animal's soft tissue, destroying it within weeks. The tissue must be something else. Perhaps the product of a later bacterial invasion. Critics, that's what they argued before. But they found collagen. So researchers also analyzed other fossils. So they went back looking at their other fossils that they'd been gathering over the years, and then they found it was present in half, 50% of the samples. And it used to be, a rare find. I have a little video of Neil Degrass Tyson talking about fossils and how it's a very, very rare find that you would find biologicals in, dinosaur bones 68 million years ago. Well, they go back and look at their samples, and they're in 50%. Wow, 50%. That means it's not very rare then. Anyway, well, the problem is for 300 years, we thought, well, the organics are all gone, so why should we look for something that's not going to be there? And nobody looked. Okay, watch this.
But none of it should be there if it's as old as the establishment asserts. Because we know that this material, whether it's proteins or other biochemicals like maybe DNA, these proteins should not be there after even 1 million years. So that's the significance, is why do we keep finding proteins and other biochemicals in fossils if they're really that old? Problem. Wait a minute, put on the brakes. You can't just brush it aside and pretend like there's no problem. There's an elephant in the room, and it's still in the room, whether or not, you can walk around the elephant, with blinders on, but all we want to do is pull the blinders down, and look, there's an elephant here, and it is original biomaterials still in fossils. And here's the thing, they say, well, we don't have a problem with, we expect this to happen. We expect these materials to still be here. Based on what? Because the science of tissue decay, the science of protein decay, demonstrates, not just illustrates, I'm talking proves in a lab, a repeatable experimental proof type of background that this stuff should not last even 1 million years. That's the elephant in the room. So to ignore the elephant in the room is one way that the human psychology deals with it. But we just want to point out that it's a bad way to deal with it. It ignores the facts of science.
So they're going to do the same thing with the information from the James Webb Space Telescope, and that's why I say it. So what does dinosaur biologicals have to do with the formation of the stars? Well, the main point is I make a prediction based on past experience, and the scientific establishment, well, they'll swear up and down in the very near future, no big deal. We knew all along that organic molecules must have been needed for the creation of the first stars. And more importantly, the inclusion of pause or soot into the equation, it has some significance that is yet to be revealed. The organic molecules, life-permitting carbon-based life, that'll be possible much earlier than previously admitted. So mark my words, it's a type of scientific setup of some sort to say that pause or soot has something to do with the star formation, and then in the next sentence say that stars also form where there's no soot. Well, it is to negate the hypothesis that pause are necessary for the formation of stars. but they're still sticking to it for some reason. And they're making it a point that it's pushed out there for some reason. But as a theist, the significance of these discoveries, it only centers on the fact that we have soot from the beginning of the universe. Or to put it in a more scientific manner, that you have the heavier elements in the periodic table which make up carbon-based life possible, and they existed from the beginning of the universe. So again, we're not just talking about just because they found, again, this cloud. Yes, it's 1.5 billion years from the beginning, but again, go back to the other two videos. We're all the way back to only 180 million years after the Big Bang, and they still find heavier elements. And again, galaxies 10 times the size of the Milky Way. So that doesn't let you off the hook. No crucible of stars necessary to cook hydrogen and helium down to the heavier elements anymore. You don't need the crucible of stars anymore. So we are not stardust, like Neil Degrass Tyson said, and he was so proud that we were literally cooked in the crucible of stars. Okay. Well, there's also no 13.6 billion years necessary for carbon-based life to form, and no need for 3 to 4 star generations and supernova to get life-permitting molecules. So life is possible from the beginning, and as a theist, I would expect this from the God of the Bible. Now, could God have used cosmic evolution? Sure, that's no problem for God. But for an atheist, that's a huge problem. They need deep time for the naturalism to work. They need the deep time. And like I said, that's why I'm making a prediction in the future. They'll stick to the time they'll doggedly stick to it, just like they did with the dinosaur biologicals and the 300 years of training that they could have only lasted 1 million years. And it was demonstrated in a lab that that's true. But anyway, then they came up, like I said, with of all things, iron in the blood. Iron in the blood is a free radical. Iron in the blood destroys. It does not preserve. And it is in a 2-year bench study, sitting on a bench in a lab, does not prove that stuff could last for 68 million years. That is nonsense. Furthermore, I predict, just like with dinosaur biologicals, the atheistic naturalistic, he will not allow this time going forward to be considered a factor that could be changed. They need the time. It's now a scientific fact that carbon-based life could exist from the beginning of the universe. And the atheist, the naturalist, he's got no clue how this could be possible. No clue. It is startling. Like in the first video, I believe, the article from the journal Nature, 99% of cosmology has just been thrown up in the air by the James Webb. It's now a scientific fact that "and God said" just got another boost from soot, smoke, and hydrocarbon fuel. I mean, that is an unmitigated proof of God's existence. Clouds of heavy elements in Milky Way-sized galaxies from the start that should not exist so early, from a naturalistic perspective, is untenable. How, you may ask? Well, we have actual evidence from the beginning of the universe of soot molecules. And as we've learned, where does soot come from? Well, normally on our planet, it came from organic materials like plants and dinosaurs. Well, which means at the beginning of the universe, at least organic life could have thrived somewhere, maybe from the start, who knows? Or it could be an artifact that God put out there, quote unquote, as proof of his existence. And the only logical way is creation. Well, why? Because there's no time for cosmological and or biological evolution that far early in the universe. Instead, "and God said" is way more logical, reasonable, and probable. In fact, the Bible got it right by looking what has been made, men are without excuse. You have scientifically verifiable evidence now that God exists. Enough said. Have a blessed day. Bye.